welcome, and we are just delighted today to have the opportunity to just express ourselves. My name is Michael Lowe. I work for Shelby County Schools, our equity office. To my right here, my brother. Introduce yourself, Patrick.
All right, good morning. It's Dr. Patrick Washington, the founder and executive director of Man Up Teacher Fellowship.
All right, and to my left.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Diarese George. I'm the founder executive director of the Tennessee Educators of Color Alliance.
All right, so we're just here today just to share just a little convo, a little brotherly convo today about how we feel about the importance of black male educators, as well as how we got started and some of the roadblocks and some of the obstacles. We're just having a little convo today about that. So we just want to start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Patrick, and role you play right now.
Yeah, man. So I've been in education now for over 2 decades. Started as a teacher at 21, and the track to school administration happened really pretty quickly. It was 26 years old when I became a principal in Memphis, and then superintendent. And having worked in both urban and rural settings, the one thing that was noticeably absent was the presence of black men. And so in 2018, we launched our first cohort of Man Up Teacher Fellows, a group of 10, and entering into our 4th year, we have 54 fellows who are teaching in Memphis and Shelby County, and in the process recruiting our next group of 30.
All right, that's awesome work. Brother Diarese, Dr. George, tell us about your work.
Absolutely. Similarly to Patrick, I've been in the education space, not as long as Patrick has. I actually was a career changer. Came into this space about 12 years ago, started in higher ed and recruitment, became a classroom teacher, but very similar to Patrick's sentiments around being isolated as not seeing too many black men in the space. I taught in the district that I grew up in, which is Clarksville, Montgomery County. Taught in a space where I was the only black man on the campus while I was there as an educator. And so that was very eye-opening to me, and it also kind of led me into the work that I'm leading now. That allowed me to kind of see some of the levers that were attached to why the education space looked the way it did, and a lot of it is attached to legislative policy and a lot of decisions that we're making strategically as to why it looks the way it looks. And so upon my 6 year of teaching, or going into my 6 year teaching, I decided to transition. I actually worked at the National Teacher Residency for a handful of years as their director of recruitment, with an explicit focus on recruiting people of color to be teachers in Middle Tennessee. And so that allowed me to kind of coincide that with the launching of my organization, TECA, which I actually started when I was teaching. And the premise behind it is like, how can we support educators of color so they can stay in the space, but then elevate their voices in such a way where they can make the systemic changes in the policy legislative spaces that allow us to be sustained in the profession. And so to date, we've launched a fellowship exclusive to educators of color. We started one last year as a pilot in Middle Tennessee. We've now expanded to 30 across the state, more than doubled the fellows, and then we're also supporting districts with the more recently adopted educator diversity policy that was adopted in February earlier this year.
All right. And this all-powerful work, I remember, Diarese, we met a few years ago back at Education Pioneers.
Yep.
We were working in that organization, trying to get up and just move up. But my name is Michael Lowe. I'm going into my 25th year, equity officer for Shelby County Schools, lifelong educator, and just trying to recruit and retain and induct brothers into education, black and brown, into the field of education. We have a program called Secure the Chalk. We partner with Man Up, trying to get our black and brown men into the classroom. Right. So that's just a powerful piece today. We just know that it's important to have not only windows but mirrors in our schools. So we're just going to move on and just talk. Let's talk a minute, brothers, about what has made it difficult, Patrick, right now. What has made it difficult to recruit and retain and train black male educators? What do you think? What's made it difficult?
Yeah, I think one thing is that, and to Diarese, and I think we all are aware of the fact that we're also trying to change the stereotype about what great teachers look like, what effective teachers look like. So it's been beneficial to be a black man, having been an educator, be able to share my own personal story that brothers can relate to. But for so many of them, to talk to them about, hey, have you considered a career in education? Like, they take a step back because, for many of the brothers, they've even fellows in our organization, their first interaction with a male teacher of color was like high school. It was a coach. It was a PE teacher. And it's that alone, just changing that narrative and changing having those conversations with guys, to get them to see themselves as educators, when in fact in our country that's they don't see themselves that often. So it's a cycle, right? So the recruitment aspect is a challenge because one, for a lot of our guys, they've never considered a career in education, and having other black men to be that voice, black and brown brothers to be that voice and say, hey, look at us, we're doing it. It's helping us to get over that hurdle, but yet it's still a challenge.
What about you, Don?
Yeah. I think it's four broad areas that we have to look at. It's practice, it's preparation, it's policy, it's partnership. In preparation, in my preparation program, there was nothing that I learned that prepared me to be the only black man on the campus. And the challenges associated with that too. Unofficial disciplinary, and sometimes brothers don't understand the civic engagement that's associated with education and how the ecosystem operates from a standpoint where you have county commissioners that are approving budgets and you have school board members who are going to supposed to be there's a civic engagement element that oftentimes isn't talked about. How schools are financed isn't oftentimes talked about in ed prep, and then more explicitly, like a lot of the systemic issues around race or racial identity, and also how that informs your professional acumen isn't talked about. And then in addition to that, you talk about practice. Brothers are transitioning to the profession, but oftentimes they don't have the affinity spaces. They don't have access to the mentors. They don't have access to leadership that's going to value their genius and say, hey, I'm not going to put you in a position where you're going to be ISS teacher. I'm not going to put you in a position where you're going to be limited and not be able to be a content lead. You get dumbed down sometimes. And then lastly, just the policies. The policies are situated to sustain you and make sure that those things that I'm talking about don't happen. And I'm not talking about district level policy. I'm just talking about as simple as within a school building. We're going to make sure that we have opportunities and leadership positions open. We'll ensure that we'll be equitable, and also that if there are black men or brown men in the building, they have an opportunity to be able to access those opportunities. So it's a lot, but
I think both of you hit on some things about breaking narratives and stereotypes. I believe one of the biggest things and challenges right now is just getting us to not look at black men as surrogate fathers in the classroom. A lot of people just say we need black men because a lot of these kids don't have a daddy at home. And we got to just break that and just dismantle that narrative that our children don't have father. It's not that. The value of a black man in the classroom is not about being a surrogate father, but it's the value that they add to the pedagogical content, the knowledge, teaching other teachers, this is how I do it. We do have a special, I won't say a special magic about us, but it is something that everybody's trying to bottle right now to say, how do you reach other young men like you do? And I believe that our additive approach to the education field is what people need to see. We actually can be masters of our content. We can be coaches, and we're not there to just be, as we say, one of my friends told me back in the day, a disciplined monkey, just handling books, buses, and butts. That's not what we need black men in the classroom for. So I do agree with that. Let's go on. Let's talk about what have your organizations done. Diarese, what has your organization done to make it easier for teachers of color, specifically black men, to join the teaching profession? What have you done?
So I think we're at the thrones and at the inception of that right now, particularly as we talk about black men. One of the things I was really focused on is that educated diversity policy piece. That's huge because we've had legislation in the state of Tennessee for almost 30 years that required us to have a policy that would require every district in the state of Tennessee to have an educated diversity goal in relation to the students of color that they're serving in the district, along with the recruitment and retention strategies. Now that policy is adopted and now in place going into this upcoming school year, it means that we have to do something. So now we have a focus. Now, not all these things that we've known about more broadly, teachers of color, but if we drill down and we actually look at the DARS within the educated workplace, we know that black men particularly are at a deficit in representation. So more recently, to kind of build on that, I partnered with some graduate students, some PhD students at Vanderbilt to launch a study around the recruitment and retention efforts and their perceptions of black men across the state. And so we deployed that survey out later this spring in like May, and we're now in the throes of kind of disaggregating the data, going through the data. They're owning the data. I just leveraged the network that I had to kind of deploy the survey and get people to fill it out. And so I'm hoping that now that we have policy in place, there's a lot of money in with ESSER dollars, there's grow your own funds coming from the State Department. It's not a matter of how and when and what, it's will. Will
Yes.
we do it? And so
Right.
everything is there. And I'm hopeful that this study that we've partnered with Vanderbilt researchers on, graduate student, doctoral students on, will kind of shed some more light explicitly around like what are some of these challenges, so we can start programmatically addressing them, and then being a little more strategic and intentional on our efforts to recruit and retain.
Yeah.
All right. I know for me, just quickly, I know we partner with the University of Memphis. I Am a Man, I Teach, River City Partnership, just trying to shape the path for young men, especially in high school, to know we have dollars set aside. If you can get this ACT score close to it, we have a vehicle, a mechanism, philanthropic dollars to lead you on the path of education. So just partnering with Man Up, hand-picking different young men from different schools across Memphis to try to get them in that pipeline, to let them know you're valued and we can be financiers for your educational pursuits. So we're here to help direct you there. What about you, Dr. D?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, again, and I think both of y'all certainly hit on some great points. You know, just to be, you know, one, kudos for getting that policy passed, because for a lot of school districts, a lot of school leaders say, you know, it was easy. It was almost like, you know, hey, we just can't find any people of color. But they have a policy in place now to say, hey, what's your approach? Like, you got to have a strategy for that. You got to really put forth an effort to that if diversity in your workspace really matters. So for us, we wanted to man up. One of the first things I wanted to do was remove the financial barriers that prevented a lot of our men from going into teaching.
Yeah, that's key. That's key.
Low pay is one of the reasons why men in general don't typically look at education. And so for us, it's like, how do we identify these brothers, give them an opportunity to become certified and or earn a master's degree without having to pay anything? And so, and that's been our approach with, you know, hey, we're going out to get the funding to support you all and match you with a mentor, put you in a school in Shelby County or some of our surrounding districts. We're going to coach you, pair you with other brothers of color who are doing this work at a high level. And you're going to get the content knowledge, because we want you to be, it's not just about your presence, but it's about you having an impact.
100%.
Like, you got to be a leader. You got to be a leader of knowledge. We want to, the 54 men that we have, we always emphasize to them the importance of making sure that you set the bar for excellence. Yeah. Because, you know, this work is all inclusive, and it's about tearing down some of the systemic barriers that prevent us from thriving in this space in education. And so with that, we're continuing to go out and get the funding to support these brothers and make sure that when they show up at a school, that they're there, they're prepared, and that they are a model for what great teaching looks like, and making a difference in the lives of kids.
All right.
Love it.
So we're going to, this last part of our convo, we're going to give your elevator pitch. Your elevator pitch right now. Diarese, how do we get this right for black men in education? How do we get it right? You got about 30 seconds. How do we get it right? What's your elevator pitch?
Real quick, elevator pitch. We the people closest to the problem have to be centered in driving the solutions. That means we got to listen and learn from people who have the lived experiences and the institutional knowledge and capacity to be able to drive the change forward. And a lot of times we want to jump in and create programs and policies and do all this other stuff, and it doesn't center and value the people who are doing the work. We got to get into spaces where we need to have a male educator of color convening, which we were planning before the pandemic. We need to get people in spaces to learn from them, listen, understand what the challenges are, and be really intentional about our efforts to make the change necessary.
Yeah,
Doc?
I think it's all hands on deck. You know, everyone now, it's not hard to find a logo where it says, you know, or a mission statement where organizations say, hey, we believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm like, so what have you done, and what are you willing to do? When you're serious, you invest in it. And so my thing is this. I'm like, hey, if you really want to change the world, transform the educational landscape, then you invest in organizations such as ours, and you make sure that your organization has a plan and a strategy to recruit men of color and to have a diverse staff. You know, regardless of where you work, you know, diversity strengthens. It's the strength of our democracy, and every system that works within this great democracy. And so we need that. And if you want to really have an impact, then you support organizations such as ours.
All right.
Write the check. It's that simple.
Write the check. And I'll just say this, that we have to continue, we think systemically, but we have to act locally right where we are. We know about everything. We know about all the racial unrest, but how do you act locally right where you are? What are you doing on your staff to recruit good men, black, brown men to education, so our children can see Like I once saw Mr. Higgins when I was a young boy looking at him saying, man, he dresses nice, smells good. He's a great teacher. And that's what it's all about. All right, we'd like to thank Memphis Education Fund for the opportunity. Now it's time for our question and answer session for our audience. So questions and answers, we're here.
Unmute Ali.
Oh, all right. 2 years on Zoom and I hadn't figured out how to unmute myself. Let me try that again. Thanks guys for that wonderful conversation. Thank you to all the participants who made it out to our breakout session. My name is Ali Jaffery. I'm an associate manager with Memphis Education Fund. You probably recognize my name from all those pesky reminder emails, but we really wanted to get a good turnout and I think we have. So thanks for showing up. Guys, I've got a few questions that I've written to ask, but I do want to turn to the audience first and see if there's any questions that they have before we jump into those. And maybe while they generate some questions, you guys could do another introduction real quick.
Again, my name is Michael Lowe. I am the Director of Equity and Access, Shelby County Schools, lifelong educator, always a teacher, and just glad to be a part of this distinguished panel as we talk about getting our Black and Brown retention and recruitment and support for our Black and Brown educators.
All right. Good afternoon. Patrick Washington, the founder and executive director of Man Up Teacher Fellowship, a teacher pipeline for men of color, pre-K through 12 here in Memphis and Shelby County, with plans to be nationwide because we know that this work is so much bigger than where we are, and we are expecting to transform the landscape of public education by working with tremendous partners and funders such as MEF to move this work forward and to really be a manifestation of what equity and action looks like. And career educator, always a teacher. I love that, Dr. Lowe, and glad to be with y'all here today.
Afternoon, good to see everybody. Also be good to be in the space with such great leaders who I hold dear and near. My name is Doris George. I'm the founder, executive director of the Tennessee Educators of Color Alliance. And we're an organization that's predicated on supporting educators of color to stay in the space and helping them elevate their voices to make systemic change in the policy landscape.
Awesome. Awesome. I should mention that I was a teacher for 4 years as well. So teacher by training. I really missed the classroom a lot of days, but it's been really fun to stay involved with the work in this way. So I'll jump into my first question here. So you guys all three talked about your own careers in education. I'm interested to hear a time each of you were able to leverage your own experiences and perspectives as Black men, as Memphians, or any other characteristic that made it easy for you to reach students in your own unique way.
Well, I think I could share briefly about while I was teaching, one of the things that I realized and witnessed is that I taught high school, and I was always frustrated with the idea that on recommendation days, which the teachers would lend recommendations for classes that students would take the next year, I was always frustrated with the lack of students of color getting recommendations for early post-secondary opportunities, AP classes, dual enrollment classes. My background is academically is in business. Had a minor in accounting, so I actually taught accounting in high school. And I fought really hard my last couple of years to establish a dual enrollment class myself. I did dual enrollment. I taught dual enrollment through the University of Tennessee Martin, but it gave me the opportunity to do my own recommendation of who I wanted in my class. And I think, just understanding the research and the data and what it says, when students have access, particularly students of color, students from low income backgrounds have access to early post-secondary opportunities, it propels them to apply for college. If they have access to more than one, it allows them to even persist through college if they do apply. And so in the school that I taught in, what we saw was a lot of the same children getting the opportunity over and over and over again. So here you have a child they're at the senior year and they've had 4 or 5 different opportunities, But the student who really needs the opportunity, and it could actually change their trajectory and put them down a path towards considering college, when colleges and other post-secondary opportunities may not have been a conversation in their household, they were getting none. And so I leveraged my relationships with a lady named Jackie at the time who was working at UT Martin to help establish a partnership where I could teach a dual enrollment class, but I also had the opportunity to then recommend students based off of their ability and not so much as their merit. So because we had a system of, if you got it before, it's more likely you're going to get it again. And if you were an A student but you went to 4.0, you didn't get the opportunity. So it allowed me to level the playing field and give folks students an opportunity that oftentimes were overlooked. And the amount of students who weren't even thinking about college that finished that course and decided to apply just increased year over year, semester over semester. So I think that was just one of the things that I kind of felt like I got right during my 6 years in the space, in the classroom.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I have to give you props for being very collaborative, and it sounds like you've done that throughout your career, and always looking for partners and bringing in people into the fold. Dr. Lowe, Dr. Washington, do you have a story to share?
Well, I think for me, in my experience, one thing a lot of people really don't talk about is the fact that many Black men, what we have, the shortage in the classroom, many times those that show a lot of expertise and children are drawn to them, they're pulled a lot of times to go straight into leadership. Many of the Black men, the research doesn't really give the full picture. Many of them are pulled to be principals. Many of them are pulled to be assistant principals because they have what we say, this magic about them that attracts young people and people respond better to them. But again, we have to value, and for me, it was always about learning how to teach, perfecting my craft, learning how to state an objective, learning how to check for understanding, and teaching other young teachers on the staff how to do that, as well as coupling it with it. Sometimes many of the Black and brown students and Anglo-Saxon white, they had never seen anybody look like me be able to espouse ideas and put things on paper and teach. They had never seen that. So I believe a lot of times, not only we need to recruit more, show them the path to leadership, but sometimes it's good for them also. We need you to simmer and wait in the classroom a little bit longer, because many of our Black men are promoted to leadership positions, but it's at some of the worst, or some of the most, let me say not worst, but some of the most historically underserved and underperforming schools in the nation have a lot of Black men in charge, because there's a research study called Glass Cliff. Many of them are given the roughest jobs. So we got to do more to support them and say, hey, we don't just need you to go down to Martin Luther King Avenue or wherever. We need you to come on up to the Poplar Corridor. You can go out here and have some advanced courses. You don't have to start at the bottom and prove that you can lead.
Yep. Yeah, so true. You got a good one, Dr. Washington?
Well, I thought long and hard about, the question, and two students came to mind. My first 2 years teaching here in the city of Memphis, I was a fourth grade teacher at a school that had 1,200 students. And each year, it was just routine. I was one of, my first year, I was one of only two male teachers on staff, male teachers of color. And the second year, I was the only male teacher on staff, and I had 18 boys and I think 13 young ladies in my classroom. And this one particular student, two things come to mind. There were 1,200 students, but all of the teachers and the principals, we all knew the most challenging students on every grade level. And this one particular student he was 2 grade levels behind, the principal brought him to my door one morning, was like, hey, we think he would really thrive in your classroom. So I'm a second year teacher. I'm still learning. I started in the middle of the year. I'm still learning how to really plan, deliver content and lessons. And this one particular day, the student had only been in my class, literally, I don't think it was a full day. I had tables. That was one of the first things I did. I got rid of the desk, and I had tables in the classroom before I was really even aware that was a good practice to try to build a sense of community and teach students how to be responsible for themselves. And this particular student, he threw a pencil across the table, hit a young lady, and I, got the student started, checked on the young lady, and I brought the student outside my door. And I said, hey, what's going on? Why would you do that? And I knew his story. I knew he had been in multiple classrooms. It was like I was the last one on the list. This was it for him. And I said, hey, man, don't you know I love you and we love you? And he was like, he stepped back for a moment. He looked at me and he said, love me? Man, you don't know how to love me. When he said that, it took me back because I didn't expect to hear that from, he was in fourth grade, but he was like 12. But what I heard him say was like, this classroom that I'm in, I recognize that I'm on a path to being basically put out of school. There hasn't been a classroom that has really catered to my needs or met my needs yet. Like, how do you think you're going to be somehow different? And so without really being privy to, even at that time, the educational vocabulary to know differentiation and to know how to build and create this space where kids could thrive and not have school happen to them, but happen for them, it turned the light on for me. And it really made me go back to my own schooling experience in a small rural community where, it was a lot of the same thing, under-resourced teachers, classrooms that were very monotonous in terms of how they just did school. And at that moment, I realized, I'm like, okay, I got to make this work for these almost 30 kids in this classroom and create lessons that will give them access to be able to master those standards and do it in a way that's going to really tap into their strengths. And I really, at the end of the day, because I'm like, hey, even at that time, people were like, these kids can't stay focused. They can't do this, but these are the same kids who like literally, they'll play video games all day. They're on whatever at the time all day. So my mantra became, how do I make learning fun within the whole country, in an orderly environment, but it's fun where kids can manage themselves. And so I began this path and this process of really empowering kids to, one, really being authentic and praising all of the progress. That's not, and empowering kids to see that they can actually do great things and be responsible for their own learning. And last but not least, I remember the principal getting on the intercom. I guess they still have intercoms in Shelby County. I don't know if they still do, but principals used to overuse those intercoms. And she was like, I'm tired of these kids running down the hall to the cafeteria, blah, blah, blah. I was on the second floor. And I asked my students, I said, how many of y'all walk to school? Several of them raised their hands. I said, so you guys cross Perkins, Knight Arnold, Mendenhall, you cross busy streets during rush hour in the morning. There's no way you can't tell me that you can get to the cafeteria in an orderly fashion. I said, I'm going to put my job on the line for you all. You heard the principal say that every teacher better be with them. I'm going to put and I wouldn't recommend this, but I wanted them to see that they could actually do it. I said, I'm going to sit back. I want you all to line yourselves up and I'll meet you in the cafeteria. I went the opposite way. And when they came in through the entrance, I was standing at the exit door with all the kids. I watched and they took it upon them, said they wanted to show me, which I already knew because over half of them walked to class. They knew how to cross a busy street. They knew how to, hit the button to get the signal. I'm like, you can walk down the hall. So that was a simple thing, but for a lot of them, they began to realize, you know what? I can actually have a voice in how I do in class, how I do school, my teacher believes in me. And it made my job a lot easier, honestly, because I began to enjoy and recognize that if I'm going to just try to control this environment, I'm going to burn out. But if I really leverage and build some positive relationships with kids, get to know them, tap into their strengths, they're going to make this thing work for both of us. And that was the guy that I became. That was a teacher. And to Dr. Lowe's point, 3 years later, I was out of there. It was gone. I didn't ask for it.
Hey, he said he became that guy. He cocooned into an administrator real quick. That's what I'm talking about.
Man, it was unreal. It was unreal. Literally,
Unmute.
I don't want to put too much out there because folks can figure out who the press was. It was a different time, but man, probably it was like third, fourth year. Sometimes the administrative team, they would be out at training. They would get a sub for me and I would run the school. I didn't know enough about running a school. Like I would sometimes be in that role for a week or 2 weeks. And it was only, I had a few, learning points or points that really were pivotal in my understanding of what great teaching looked like. And it just turned things around, which is why for Man Up, we're adamant about, before you become a leader, you got to be a master teacher. You cannot lead career educators and master teachers if you don't know how to teach. Become an amazing teacher first.
Absolutely. That's awesome, guys. I'm thinking back to all my students, and that was a very common refrain, is that you don't know me, you can't relate to me. And it took a lot of relationship building, a lot of hallway conferences before they let you in. But once you get there, you can get a lot done. Guys, this session is titled Truth and Reconciliation, and we've done some of that in the pre-recording related to the misconceptions or maybe mischaracterizations of Black male educators. So I want to keep building on that, right? And I want to hear, is there anything else that as partners and allies in the work that we can affirm with you and learn from you related to the misconceptions or mischaracterizations of Black male educators?
Well, I will say first, there's a misconception, again, that we are there to, in many schools across not only Memphis, but across America, you hear more language if you were to do an equity walk with a child throughout a school day. From the time they walk in, you hear things about pull up your pants, take the hood off, no running, walk in line, stop talking, track me, get your book out. And many times the Black or brown student, especially the male child, is looked at, the research says 3 to 4 years are tacked on to that child's age. So they're already adultified quickly. So the myth I want to deconstruct is just saying that we are there to cultivate the genius in every child, to help other people fall in love with the problem of educational equity. I'm gonna say that again. You have to fall in love with the problem of educational equity, to just look around and say, who's in my class? Who's raising their hand? Who's in the front office? Who is the principal? Why are the teachers assigning that homework? Why are the students getting talked to that way? What kind of feedback are they getting? We have to be valued as men and women of color. And I won't always say women of color, but I'm saying the Black people, especially for Black men, to know we offer a whole lot more than just helping you with the most underserved or some of the most difficult students in your school. I bet Dr. Washington didn't share when he got that school, just like myself, I wasn't given the creme de la creme school. I was given a turnaround situation. And I'm gonna say this, another thing is, why are we given, just like in coaching, why are we always given the team or the school that didn't make the playoffs? Why can't we start at the top? Why do we have to work our way so up so high to prove? So I just want to dismantle the theory that we have to be twice as good, that we have to be dressed better, speak more clearly. I want to dismantle those things and say, we are here to teach others how to be master craftsmen of reaching and also coming into space with our underserved, marginalized students. And that's what it's about. Everybody can't hold space with a Black or brown child. Everybody can't do it, but we can in most situations. And it's not because of the skin color. Race is more than culture. And race is not culture at all times, but we can do a whole lot more. And we don't have to be given the worst of the worst. Give us the top sometimes. Let me get a team that made the play. Give me a school that's a level 5 and let me stay there. I should have to work my way up. So give me the best. If I'm doing a great job, don't always give me turnaround.
I love it. That's an important message. This is a tagline for me.
Yeah, I think for me, and I'm gonna really approach this, respond through the lens of the founder of Man Up, and also the lens of one who sat in the seat of the superintendent, and where I was one of a handful of elected superintendents in the country. I was one of 50. And so politics was every day. I mean, there's a political variable or component to schools, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I think, I mean, that's healthy as long as it's balanced. But what I have found is that too often these school systems that we call are actually politically driven systems that just happen to have schools in them. And so it's important that I bring that to light, especially now with all of the ESSER funding and all of the money. There's money circulating everywhere. And for me, when I ran the system, I said, okay, if we're truly about making sure that we give kids a world-class experience, let's look at how we're spending every dollar. And if the money that we're spending on programs or whatever it may be is not leading to getting those kids those results or those experiences, then we're lying to ourselves. And so, because I heard Charles Swindoll, he said, you know, I don't have to know you. Just let me see your finances for a year and I can tell you what you value. School systems, all of these organizations with this money were saying, we want diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I say this, but hey, y'all, some of y'all know me, some of you don't. I'm not one to bite my tongue anymore. I'm glad that I'm no longer in politics. You're serious when how you allocate your funds line up with what you say you want your outcomes to be. And so I think for organizations that are in position to challenge folks, and whatever the most politically savvy way, you may not want to have me a part of that conversation, and I can work that too. But we have to say, okay, what are we doing to make sure that we actually are getting, because here's the other thing. Equity, to accomplish equity in education, we're also going to have equity in other areas of our society. We know that. What happens when schools become equitable? The power pendulum shifts. That's not going to happen if we're not pushing and challenging people who have all of the taglines. But when we look at how you're allocating your funds, it doesn't line up to what you say you want your outcomes to be. And so for me, I think that's where we are. For as an organization, it's like, okay, you know, our mantra this year for all of 80 plus of our fellows, your presence is your protest. So make sure that you represent the best of who we are, and your presence should be about, like, you should embody the work of social justice, equity, all of that, excellence in the classroom.
Absolutely. Guys, we are close to wrapping up. I want to give everybody one last chance to speak. And as you're wrapping up, give us some stat to walk away with related to the efficacy, the impact of Black male educators.
Well, I say collectively, not necessarily specific to Black males, but Black educators in general. You know, if a student has access to at least 2 Black teachers throughout the duration of their K-12 experience, they're 32% times more likely to attend a college and persist. And I think obviously Black men play a huge role in that. And to the extent that we're able to have more in front of kids from all backgrounds, we know that academic growth gains are obviously impacted in a positive way. So leave that there.
I'm going to say for Black and brown students, the research says that they need 4 consecutive years of high quality, some of the top quartile teachers to help close the achievement gap, or what we say the educational debt, I should say. But we need to have 4 consecutive years to close the educational debt. And that's some educational research. I can give you that research, but they need 4 consecutive years of high quartile teachers teaching them to close the educational debt that's been owed to them. So we owe all of our students, it doesn't matter what grade, but they need 4 years back to back of great, effective teachers. And why not try to get some of the best and brightest Black and brown educators to mirror that expectation?
Yeah, I just ditto that. And, you know, all of it, you know, it's I point to a John Hopkins study. It's an economic issue. If just having a teacher of color, especially 3rd through 5th grade, increases the likelihood of students to finish high school and go into college instead of dropping out. And we know when students drop out, there's a tendency for them to end up being a burden to society, opposed to being a contributor to society. When we look at it in that through that lens, this is an economic issue. So we can prevent the building and construction of more prisons. We can disrupt the school to prison pipeline by investing in teacher preparation programs, particularly those who are trying to increase diversity in our schools. And therefore we increase the economic impact. We ultimately transform communities as a whole.
Absolutely. Guys, we got a lot of work to do, but I'm glad to be doing it with you all. And I really appreciate everybody joining us here today. We've got a few more segments left. So if you will, please, when you leave this session, go back to Expo Pass, join us in the movement room featuring Zumba and mindful meditation. To leave this session, you'll click the leave button at the bottom of your Zoom application, go back to your Chrome browser and find us in Expo Pass. We have one more big speaker for today. That's Dr. Patina Love. And we have another giveaway at the end of the day, so don't miss that. If you're still here with us in the room, please send some love to these guys. And good to see you, all three of you. And I'll see you in person soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
You know.